Hello, welcome everybody. I will just talk for a little while as I give everybody time to log in and join us. My name is Carla Whitaker. I work for CalSOAP. That is the California Student Opportunity and Access Program. I'm the academic coordinator. I have worked for CalSOAP for, oh my goodness, 21 years. And tonight, the webinar that I'm going to be hosting is going to be about writing college application essays. So this is especially pertinent if you are a 12th grader, if you are a parent or guardian of a 12th grader, or if you're going to be a 12th grader soon and you plan to apply to maybe to a UC school or maybe to a private or out-of-state university that requires the Common App. We're going to spend a lot of time going over the UC PIQs because I know a lot of people do want to apply to the UCs. And we'll also kind of briefly touch on the Common App and how they're similar and different from the UC Personal Insight questions. You'll notice that although you're not able to type into the chat, you should be able to type into the Q&A. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there should be a little Q&A icon that you can tap on and you can ask a question. And if it involves like personal info, you can ask anonymously if you like. And I have a couple of student staff who are here helping me today, Danny and Charmaine, and they're going to be doing their best to answer your questions in the Q&A. But if there's something that they're not sure of the answer of, they're going to ask me out loud so that I can bring it up as we're going through the slide deck. One more piece of kind of housekeeping detail, so to speak, is that this webinar is recording and it will be available starting tomorrow on our CalSOAP website. And also the slide deck that I'm sharing will also be available right next to that recording link on our CalSOAP website tomorrow. So calsoapsandiego.org on the blog section, that's where you will be able to access this recording if you want to watch it again, or if you have to leave early, or if you know someone else who wants to watch it, or you want to use it as a classroom lesson or anything like that, you're welcome to do so. And again, I will also be sharing the slide deck. So when I am sharing slide deck, I'm not actually able to see the chat or the Q&A, but Charmaine and Danny will be watching that for me. So if you do have any questions at all, please go ahead and drop them right in there. And I'll go ahead and get started. I will share my screen. Oh, and thank you. Charmaine just put in the chat the website where this recording and the slide deck will be listed starting tomorrow. So if you want, you can go ahead and click on that and favorite it, bookmark it, whatever, so you know that that's where it's going to be. All right, let's get into it. All right. Okay, so I know there's some dark bars there right now. They'll go away in a second. So I just want to mention that CalSOAP is on social media. If you are on formerly Twitter, now X, or on Facebook, we're at San Diego CalSOAP. Or if you are on Instagram, we're at CalSOAP San Diego. And if that is a good way for you to get information, then I definitely encourage you to follow us on one of those formats so that you can get up-to-date information. We're always posting scholarships, tips about upcoming events, everything like that. So please do follow us if you are on social media. And just the reminder that the recording of this webinar and the slide deck will be posted tomorrow at calsoapsandiego.org on our blog section. All right. So first, we're going to talk about the personal insight questions. Oh, also, I wanted to share my email address. It is KK that's with 2 Ks, kkwhitaker@ucsd.edu. And I do encourage you to save that information because if you are especially a 12th grader and you would like an extra person to kind of be a pair of eyes on your UC PIQ, maybe you're writing one and you would like some feedback, I am happy to do that. Most people do it in Google Docs and then they add me as an editor, and you are welcome to do that. That is just a free service that CalSOAP provides. And do feel free to add me if you would like me to. And I'll share my email again later, but I just want to make sure you know that I'm willing to definitely look at your PIQs or Common App responses or any other kind of college application essay. I'm happy to do that. All right. So when are written responses required and what types of applications? Well, in the UC application, which is the one we're going to spend the most time on, they give you 8 prompts and you have to answer 4. All right. So 4 short written responses there. For the common application, which is what a lot of private universities use, they give you 7 prompts, but you choose 1. And then there's other things like a program, like maybe an EOP program or a scholarship application might also ask for some type of short essay or written response. The one we're really going to spend the most focus on tonight is the UC PIQs. All right, so if you are a 12th grader or when you are a 12th grader, generally the UC applications are always due. The last day to submit is November 30th of grade 12. So the application opened already. It's already open. You can create an account. You can start, uploading information into your UC application for any of the 9 undergraduate UCs. You can start submitting as early as October 1st. But the actual due date is November 30th. I strongly recommend you do not wait and submit on November 30th. I recommend that you get started early, get working early, and submit it before the deadline, because on that last day, they do often have a lot of website crashes and problems. So definitely please submit before November 30th. So if you're applying to a UC school, for example, UC San Diego, UC Irvine, Riverside, LA, Merced, Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, Davis, what am I missing? I know I'm missing one of them. In any case, Berkeley. They use 13 different factors when they are reviewing your application. So they are looking at, probably the number 1 is your academic achievement, meaning your GPA, the classes that you took to get that GPA. They are also looking at you in the context of other students at your school. They are looking at your extracurricular involvement and or your job or internship or community service or sports or leadership, basically what you've done outside the classroom. They have a number of things they use, but one of those factors is the UC PIQs. Every campus uses the PIQs a little bit differently in terms of how they weight them or how much they look at them. There has never been a UC admissions office that will say, well, the PIQs count for this much of our decision. They won't put it in a number. If I had to guess, though, I would say probably maybe roughly around 30% of the decision can be affected by the PIQs. So that's a pretty big factor, especially if you're kind of on the bubble or on the cusp and looking at the rest of your application. It's not an automatic accept. The PIQs can have a big influence on whether you are accepted or offered admission to a university, a UC. All right, so let's get into them. The first thing you want to do is get inside an admissions officer's brain, because the admissions officer, as much as they like you, they're not so worried about what you have already done, except in terms of how that applies to how are you going to be an asset on that campus. So what kind of student do you think that they're looking for, right? They want a student who has resilience, who's not going to give up in the face of challenges. They want students who are going to succeed academically and have a strong commitment to academics and to their grades. They also want good, well-rounded people who are going to be good citizens, who are going to give back to their communities. So if you have some information about yourself that applies to you now, that admissions officer is thinking, oh, so when they get to my campus, they're going to do this or that. Like they're going to be that lead researcher, or they're going to be that person who leads their group in their discussion or their lecture, or they're going to be the person that gives back to our campus community or shows leadership or plays this instrument or plays this sport or whatever it is. So always be thinking, they're wondering, how is this person going to enhance my campus? So when you picture yourself in college and as you're writing your personal insight questions, you want to think about, does this relate to something like my future planned major or minor or career? All right. Also, maybe it relates to clubs that at the college level, you maybe want to join that club if it exists, or start it if it doesn't exist, or seek a leadership like an officer position in that club. Or maybe your PIQ response relates to, if it's about community service, they're hoping and expecting that you'll continue to want to reach out and serve your community when you are at the college level. And then finally, it might also have to do with how you interact with people. Like, how would you interact with students, with staff members, with professors and faculty? How is it going to relate to maybe your approach to studying, group work, or academics? So always be picturing yourself, how is this going to relate to my college self? I'm going to go through a few things, what the UC PIQs are and what they are not. So a few things that the PIQs are, this is students, it's their voice, it's their story. It's their opportunity to provide context. So they can already see you on paper. They can see your grades, they can see your transcript, they can see a list of your activities. But say that two students look absolutely identical on paper. They have the same GPA, they've taken the same classes, they have the same number of hours of extracurriculars. How are they going to discern between those two? They dive into the PIQs because that gives them context, like, oh, what is this student interested in, passionate about, that type of thing. Also, particularly at the UCs, they're reviewed for content, not structure. So they do not have to be like any kind of certain number of paragraphs or a 5-paragraph essay. Think of it as a snapshot of yourself and think of it as personal. They want you to talk about you. All right. So share new information that you didn't already have elsewhere in the application. They do like specific concrete examples, but they don't need to be there in the scene with you. They don't need to hear the roar of the crowd or smell the bread baking or whatever beautiful metaphor you want to use in your writing. The UCs in particularly are not really into creative writing for these responses. In fact, they stopped calling them personal statements. They stopped calling them essays. They now just call it a response because they're specifically not looking for creative writing. The Common App, on the other hand, might like that, and I will get into that a little bit later. They do want you to use first person. I know in some academic essays, you're discouraged from using first person, but in this case, you do want to say I and me and mine. Kind of think of it like main character energy. You are the main character in your story. Okay. And then you always want to be answering the question, so what? So if you explain how you play a sport, they'll say, awesome, but so what? Are you going to play that sport in college? Or if you're not going to play it here at college, maybe you've learned something about like teamwork or leadership or discipline. Okay. Maybe you write about how you play an instrument. They'll say, awesome, but so what? Are you going to major in music? Are you going to play in the band here? Maybe you really love an academic subject or a club, and they'll say, awesome, but so what? Are you going to then study that subject or get involved in that club here? Think about how am I going to enrich their college campus? Because you all have unique and wonderful things that will enrich a college campus. Okay, so what are the PIQs not? They are not an audition, okay? You cannot link to anything like any kind of videos or photos or anything like that. They don't need a performance. This is also not an academic essay or a vocabulary quiz. You don't have to use fancy words. They don't need a creative writing piece. They don't want you to retell your entire life story. They would like you to literally just carefully read the prompt and answer the prompt. And I can't tell you how many students get away from that, but really try to focus on, I just need to answer this one question. How would I do it if I was in an interview or a face-to-face conversation with an admissions officer? It's not how would you talk about it to a friend, but how would you talk to an admissions officer if they asked you this question out loud? Okay, so what are the no-nos? What are things to avoid? You want to avoid acronyms. Like if you say something like, I'm an AVID, the first time you write out AVID, you want to put advancement via individual determination. And then after that, you can just refer to it as AVID because they get applications from all over the state and the country and the world, and they don't know what every CSF and FAA and everything that you might know that acronym by heart, but they don't know what it stands for. So make sure the first time you do that, you spell it out and then you can use the acronym. This is not a creative piece of writing. It doesn't need a title. It doesn't need quotes or dialogue. You don't necessarily have to have a clever hook at the beginning. And be careful if you're writing about someone else, you're not writing really about them. You're writing about how they influenced you and how you act because of that. They don't need to be in the moment with you. That's the scene setting, okay? They don't need flowery language, as lovely as it is and as capable as I'm sure you are of allegory and metaphor and simile and everything. They don't need that here. Be cautious with jokes and sarcasms, and humor is okay, but you want to be appropriate and never like offensive or come off the wrong way. And you don't just need to summarize the rest of your application. All right. Some people, when it comes to prompts 4 and 5, and I'll get to the prompts in a moment, but those both prompts are about overcoming challenges and obstacles. And sometimes people say, well, if I write and I tell my story, I'm going to sound like I'm whining and complaining and saying, poor me, poor me. That's not true. The kind of tone that you want to strike is you don't have to complain, but you can explain. If it's a true fact about your life, it's not a complaint. Right? A complaint would involve things like bitter language. You don't have to do that, but you can explain your true circumstances. And if you have a challenge that you've overcome that you choose to write about, then just explain it. It's okay. They do want to hear about it. They don't consider it complaining or whining. Okay. I also tell people to be authentic rather than strategic. Yes, you want to figure out what are they looking for, but you don't want to fabricate a person who doesn't exist, right? You do want to tell them what your interests are, where your passions lie, where you spend your time, what you find interesting, and kind of the crux of who you are and you know, authentically who you are, not I think they want this kind of person, so that's who I'm going to make out myself out to be, or I'm going to create this fake hardship that didn't happen, or I'm going to make up community service I didn't do, or something like that. So be as authentic as possible. All right, as I said, there's going to be 8 prompts and you can answer 4. There is a word limit of only 350 words each. That's honestly one long paragraph or a few shorter paragraphs. It's not long. It's not even a page. Okay, 350 words is not very long at all. You want to choose the 4 that best showcase who you are. And UC says over and over again, all 8 questions are given equal consideration in the application review process. So there's no advantage or disadvantage to choosing certain questions over another one. Like, it's not true that you should write about community service or their favorite is number 8, or that's not true. What they want you to do is choose the 4 who show who you are the best. And if there's some that you don't like, awesome, because half of them you don't have to answer at all. All right. So you should find out of the 8, there should be 4 that you can write about. Okay, I strongly recommend that you do something like, instead of trying to fill it out on the UC application itself, to maybe put it into a Google Doc or something like that, where you can look at the word count, you can have other people read it, you can have an English teacher read it, you can have a counselor read it if they have time, you can have a friend read it, you can have me read it, etc. And a couple things to know is that when you do put it into the UC app, it's going to format so that everyone's font is the same. So you can't choose a specific type of font. You can't say, oh, I'm going to choose Calibri because it'll really show who I am. All right. You can't choose, I'm going to choose 14 point because it's easier to read than 12 point. It'll all be the same when you put it in there. You also won't be able to use like a special character, an image, a link, an emoji. They won't be able to see any of that. So it's just going to be regular text. People often ask me, okay, how important is grammar? Now, technically, they're not scoring you on grammar at all. It's not read for mechanics or spelling or organization or grammar or style. It's not scored or graded the same way something would be in your English class, okay? However, what they want to make sure you don't do is you don't want it to be so full of mistakes and so full of misspellings or errors that they literally have trouble reading it. And I have read essays that the grammar is so poor that it's not a matter of, well, they didn't know the objective versus, you know, pronoun case, or it's not like they're being grammar snobs. They just really want to be able to clearly read and understand what you wrote. But technically, yes, you want it to be good, but it doesn't have to be perfect, because technically that's not what they're scoring on. They're scoring on the content. They're looking at who you are as a person. I do want to mention there's also something called the additional comment section in 2 places in the UC application, and one of those is in the PIQ section. So this is not required. Do not fill out this section unless you truly need to. Admissions officers often I don't want to say complain, but they say a lot of times people will say, oh, good, this is my chance to write a 5th essay or answer one of the prompts I wanted to answer but didn't get to. They say that's not what this is for. This is only for special information that's not found elsewhere on the application. One of the things it might do is explain some type of gap or deficiency. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that there was one semester where your grades were lower than usual, and you want to explain that because you haven't explained that elsewhere. Maybe you were dealing with the death of a loved one. Maybe you were dealing with housing or food insecurity in your family. Maybe you were dealing with, maybe you have like a learning challenge or a learning disability that you were trying to figure out. So it would be for things like that. That's kind of special information if you choose to share it. Again, it's not just a chance to write an extra essay. And it has an open format, no minimum, a 550 word maximum. So again, this is there if you need it, but it's not just a 5th PIQ prompt. All right, I'm going to go through the 8 PIQs. I know I'll have like little quick writes that are ideas. What I would recommend is don't try to write anything now. We won't have enough time, but you can get the slide deck later on. And if you want, you can then use these to yourself actually start writing and drafting, outlining, brainstorming about your own quick writes. Okay, so this is the actual UC Personal Insight question prompt number 1. Describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. Notice that they're not asking you to write about all 3 of those things. You could choose just one case where you had a positive influence, or one case where you resolved a dispute, or one case where you contributed to group efforts over time. All right, so that is UCPIQ number 1. Again, we're looking for a 350 word response. If you're trying to get thinking about this one and you want some help, you can kind of ask yourself, was there a time you stepped up? Maybe you took the role of a leader in a group, a team, a family, or at work, right? Briefly describe that experience and then explore what did it mean to you? Did you grow because of that leadership experience? What impact did it have in other places in your life? And one thing they would warn you, because they see this a lot, is that this is where a lot of people say, what a leader is, or my definition of leadership, they don't need to know your definition. They want to know what you did, right? Even if it wasn't a formal role or you didn't have a title associated with being a leader, it could have been a leader in a group project in class. It could have been a leader at your shift at work. It could have been a leader in, a performing arts, like in a dance show, a music show, something like that. But they don't need to know what your definition is. They need to know what you did. So keep that in mind. All right. Any questions so far? Charmaine and Danny, we're okay?
Yeah, no questions here.
Okay. All right. Here's the second PIQ. Every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So here they're looking for 350 words on how do you express your creative side. If you're struggling trying to get thinking about this one, you can think of, you don't have to limit yourself to conventional definitions of being creative. Some people think they're not creative, but they are in surprising ways. Maybe it's something that where your intuition guided you or your imagination guided you to something like solving a problem or resolving a dispute. Or maybe you have a creative passion. Maybe you feel like you have to create artistically. Maybe you have to draw, paint, dance, sing, write, poetry, whatever it happens to be. If you feel like that's you, that's the kind of thing you can write about here. All right, number 3. What would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? Notice they don't ask for a list of your talents, plural, or skills, plural. They would really like you to focus on just one and really develop your essay to give examples of what is that talent, what is that skill, how have you shown it, and how have you developed it? Okay, so try to focus on just one and not a bunch of them. But when you're doing a quick write, you can start with things like a list of talents and skills, and then ask yourself, which one of these is the most meaningful to me? Or which one of these is the most important to me? And also you may have always had this talent or skill, but try to focus your answer on the present or the recent past. Like try to focus on, I would say, high school, not necessarily going back to something like second grade. I mean, you can reference that, but if you've continued with this talent or skill, you should have some more recent examples or descriptions of that talent or skill.
Hi, Carla.
Good.
So we do have a question, if you don't mind me asking it.
Yes.
One of the students asked, even though UCs don't like creative writing, can you creatively write for the second prompt as long as you answer it?
That's a great question. I'm going to tell you what the admissions officers always tell me is that even if it's a prompt about creativity, that doesn't mean they need to see a creative answer. I would recommend not doing that. However, if you want to give it a try and then share it with me or send it to me and I will give you my feedback, you can do that because you never know, there might be a quirky instance where that might work. But I would remind people too that if they happen to be applying to a UC under a major like theater or dance, like a performing arts, they may, after the application, they may in addition ask for something like a portfolio, like a piece of artwork or an audition. And that would be your chance to express yourself creatively instead of in the PIQ itself. So that would be my recommendation, is to go ahead and answer it like you're answering the others. But if you're just burning to do that, go ahead and give that a try, share it with me, and I'll give you my feedback on it. All right. We're moving on to PIQ number 4. Describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity, or, notice it's either or, it's not both, or you have worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. So what would be a significant educational opportunity? A lot of times I give examples like getting involved in Cal Soap as an organization. If you've gone to one of our senior Jumpstart events, if you've participated in a webinar like this, if you've gone to our swag program, if you've met with one of our college readiness coaches, if you go to one of our Cash for College workshops and learn how to fill out your FAFSA, that's taking advantage of educational opportunities. Sometimes people are involved in programs like Price, Cardinals Interact, Mesa, Puente, Trio, Talent Search, Gear Up, EOP, EAOP, things like that. So you could talk about those educational opportunities if you've done one, or maybe you want to talk about a barrier that you overcame, an educational barrier. So there's a couple ways to think about this in terms of like, can you think of an opportunity or can you think of a barrier? It's okay if you experience one and not the other. Are you engaged in any like educational programs, community-based orgs? Have you had to supplement your coursework? Maybe you're doing a special curriculum, maybe you're homeschooled or you're in a magnet or academy, that kind of thing. And just a reminder that UCs, they don't compare students to one another. They're kind of looking for you in the context of your application. So when they look at your academic history, it's not so they compare you to another student. They want to see, well, how does this student's opportunity or barrier relate to the rest of their application? All right, and number 5 is just straight up a challenge. Describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? I would remind people that in this one, if I had to break up this essay in terms of content, describing the challenge would be 20% of the essay, and 80% of it would be steps you have taken to overcome the challenge. So they don't want a whole 350 words about the challenge. They maybe want 50 words about the challenge and 300 words about how did you deal with it? How are you overcoming it? What did you do? What actions did you take? What did you learn from it? Okay, so make sure that it's not just about the challenge itself, it's about you overcoming it. So think to yourself, I mean, we've all had difficult experiences. Have you had one that you want to share about? Maybe you're currently working your way through it. Did this challenge impact your ability to be a good student? All right. And also, while your challenge can be personal, like it could be social, it could have to do with mental health or a family issue, at the same time, they're asking, how did it affect your high school academic achievement? Because obviously, we're not in separate silos. Every part of our life affects every other part of our life. So even if we're going through a family challenge, that can definitely affect us academically, etc. So if you choose to write about the challenge, think about that. By the
We
way,
have a
oh yeah, go ahead.
oh yes, so we have a question in the chat. It's can you speak to the challenge of school via COVID, or is that too general?
So yes, you can speak about COVID because some people will say that, like, especially that this graduating class, a lot of you I know spent your freshman year online, and that type of thing. Yes, you can write about it. However, it's not that you're going to write about COVID. You're going to write about how did it affect you, right? That's the 20%. But then 80%, how did you take steps to overcome it? What actions did you take? How did you change? How did you become a stronger, more gritty, more resilient person? Right. So it's not that you're discussing the pandemic. Yes, that was the challenge, but now how did you overcome it? So yes, you can talk about it, but it's really not about the challenge. It's about you overcoming it. Any others?
Yes, I believe Daniela's answering one, and then one other one came in after that. It's does sickness count as a challenge? Being diagnosed with hypothyroidism affect learning capabilities?
Yes, anything that it could be an illness, it could be anything that affects your academic achievement. Yes, absolutely. You can list that as a challenge and you can talk about overcoming it. Yes.
I'll go ahead and ask this other question because maybe other people um, have the same question concerning their majors. This one says, I'm really interested in majoring in political science, and I really want to showcase that in my UC PIQs, but I don't want them all to sound the same and similar. How can I show variety while also staying on topic with my interests?
Okay, good question. So if you're truly answering the prompt, even if each of your 4 responses touches on something like your major, which is going to be political science or whatever, you're still going to be writing to answer the prompt, and that's what's going to make each response unique. So if you're writing about a challenge that you overcame and how that inspired you to become a political science major, that's awesome. Maybe you're writing in the one that's about community service, and your community service is about a social justice activism or a cause that you're passionate about. That's fine. You can kind of keep that similar theme, but as long as you're truly answering the prompts, all the prompts are so different that each of your responses will have a different flavor or a different tone. Even if they're all kind of related a little bit to your major, they still should answer the prompt and be about either leadership or creativity or a challenge or whatever it is. And if you do that, if you truly answer the prompt, then you can kind of have a similar theme throughout your different essays. All right, moving on. Number 6. Think about an academic subject that inspires you. Describe how you have furthered this interest inside and or outside of the classroom. Okay. So if you have a passion for a specific academic subject, it's your favorite subject, or you can't get enough of it, or it's really meaningful to you, do you do anything else related to it? Like some people are really into psychology, but their school doesn't offer it. So maybe they go to online courses for it, or maybe they take a community college course, or they can't wait till maybe their junior or senior year when they could take AP Psych or something like that. Or maybe they don't have a robotics class, but your school has a robotics club and you're interested in STEM. Or it could be the actual subject. It could be English, history, math, a language other than English, science, whatever. It could even be a specific science, like you really love biology or you really love physics. If it's going to maybe tie into an area you plan to study, like it's going to somehow end up being your major or minor or career path, you could talk about that. And also, it doesn't have to be a quote unquote core academic subject. It could be an elective. Like it could be auto shop, it could be pottery, it could be anything. All right. Number 7 is about service. What have you done to make your school or community a better place? Very simple, very straightforward. This is the service question. Maybe you saw a problem and you were motivated to act and you learned something from that effort. Maybe you contributed to a positive change. Now, whether that was a change in your family, in your school, in your friend circle, in your community, or maybe even like a city, a county, or the world, what steps did you take to accomplish it? So if you did work in a group, that's fine, but focus on what tasks did you do as part of that group? What were your roles? What were your responsibilities? And remember that they're not necessarily looking for somebody that had the quote, biggest impact or the fundraiser that made the most money. They more want to see like your passion and your connection to people. So even if you did something that you consider very tiny, or something that it wasn't formal, it wasn't a project, you just did it out of kindness, that still can be an act of service. And if you feel like that describes you and that's an important part of your personality, you can write about it. Number 8 is completely open-ended. Beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admissions to the University of California? Now, by the way, you're going to fill out one UC application and you'll check boxes for which campuses you want it to go to. Maybe it will just go to one UC, maybe it will go to 4, maybe it will go to 6 or 9, who knows. But I do warn people, unless you're literally only applying to one UC, if you apply to more than one, when you write this response, don't reference a specific campus, because if I'm UC San Diego and you're writing about how much you want to get into UCLA Film School, I'm going to be maybe a little offended and say, well, maybe UCLA will admit you. I mean, I'm kidding, but I'm just saying don't try to specify certain campuses in this statement. Just talk about the University of California as a system. So this one is like, if you are that creative person that you're like, I don't know, maybe a few of these prompts appeal to me, but not all of them. I want to say something different, then this is for you. This prompt is for you. You could maybe look at something like examine your daily routine or look at your transcript. Is there anything that you would need to elaborate on? What reflects who you are that you haven't seen so far in your application? Also, they're not going to ask for resumes, transcripts, letters of recommendation, links, anything like that. They're just wanting you to write about it. Okay. So those are the 8 UC PIQs. You choose 4, you go from there. One thing I would say, even though yes, you can, and no, you can't recycle your Common App essay. Yes, you can start and have kind of 2 different versions of something similar. Like, for example, the Common App also has a question about serving your community. What you could do is have a shorter version, like a 350-word version of something like that, and then a longer version, but they might also be different in tone and style. And you don't just want to take a 600-word essay and then just stop at word 350 and say, oh, that's all that I need to do. You need to actually write 2 different essays, even if they do share some of the same sentences and so forth. And again, UCs don't want creative writing. Other universities might. Just a reminder on that. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this. It's not as important. Okay, now we're going to do something fun. You are going to be the admissions officer. I'm going to read you actual case studies. These are from actual UC applications. And I have 2 of them. Neither of them is bad. I want to emphasize that. They're both really, really good pieces of writing. However, maybe one or both of them adds value to the application. Maybe one or both of them was a missed opportunity where they could have gone in a different direction that would have helped more. But I just want to emphasize, neither of them is bad. This is not a good essay, bad essay type of exercise. This is just giving you an example and saying, did this really add value or did they miss an opportunity? So we could even take a little poll and I'll see what you think. So I'm going to read this one quickly out loud.
Carla.
Yes.
Sorry, right before you begin, there's another really good question that came in.
Okay.
That I think should be answered out loud.
Okay.
So this student said, I want to major between sociology or environmental sciences, but I'm not sure which one to choose. How would I navigate answering question 6 as I want to tie those subjects to it? Do I just choose one subject?
Great question. So what you can do is, instead of saying that you've decided on X and it's going to be your major, you can say, I'd like to study, because you could double major. You could have a major and a minor. You could take classes in both of those subjects. So you don't necessarily have to say, I'm going to be a sociologist or I'm going to be an environmental scientist. You can say that's a subject I want to continue to study in college without specifically naming it as your major. All right, that is a great question. Okay. I have danced along the poverty line my whole life. The soothing melodies from a mother to her child as they drifted to sleep were mere dreams, realities you'd only see in the movies. Life was based on survival, sink or swim, one might say, struggling to stay afloat in this ocean of a world. I quickly recognized that a comfortable life is a luxury that stands far out of my grasp. Being forced out of touch with my infantile dreams and forced to come to grips with my reality brought along one of my greatest attributes, my fortitude. Living as the product of an immigrant mother and lower-class father, my aspirations oftentimes felt out of reach. My tolerance for the harsh world grew involuntarily. I was born into destitution. Facing life's hardest battles was inevitable. The countless sleepless nights my parents spent in order to keep a roof over our head demonstrated their mettle to my younger self, a mettle I had to endow myself with too. Just like the pale skin and singular dimple I inherited from my mother, I endeavored to grasp her strength, both in and out of the classroom. I've possessed a deeper spirit than a number of my peers due to the hardships I've faced. While it's difficult to stray away from the fixed mindset that tells me I cannot afford a better future, I paved the way for the life that I've always dreamed of through my education. My exceptional tenacity encouraged me to take advanced placement courses that offer an advantage at a higher educational level. The extravagance of maintaining the successful life my parents could not afford excites me. Persevering through the austerity towards the sophisticated, serene lifestyle showcases my drive. Although I learned to survive off the crumbs of society, the faith I hold for myself and my education pushed me closer to the elixir of the rapturous life I plan to lead. Okay. So let's see if I can start a little poll. I'm going to just quickly poll you and I'm going to launch it now. You should see it pop up. And there's just two questions. There's just two answers. Did this PIQ add value or did the writer miss an opportunity? So answer the first one. Go ahead and say if you thought it added value or missed an opportunity. And I'm sorry, the second one is appearing at the same time and we haven't read the second essay yet. I'm sorry if they both came up. It's all right. All right. Okay. I'll give you 5 more seconds. Okay. So the results are, let's see, about 65% of you said they missed an opportunity. About 35% of you said it added value. I did state in the beginning that these are all good, right? These are all good essays, but some of them are going to be better at adding value and some of them are a missed opportunity. So let's see what we think this one would be. Let me reshare my screen. Okay. So what an admissions officer would say about this one is it was a missed opportunity. It is very beautifully written. It's just not what they're looking for at the UC. It has things they ask you not to put in, like long, flowery descriptions, philosophy, creative writing. Again, it's beautiful, but that's not really what they're looking for. They did not learn much about the students' actual actions. The only time the students said what they actually did to overcome or to have that drive is that they took AP classes. So there's that one sentence that was helpful, but other than that, it's like 320 other words about other stuff that doesn't really give them an idea of what the student did in terms of what actions did they do or how did they take advantage of an opportunity. It added information the admissions officer doesn't really need to know. So in this case, they would say that was a missed opportunity. It's not a bad essay. It's just not quite what they were looking for. Okay, let's look at another case study and see what we think of this one. All right, this one is about leadership. Okay, in 2020, I founded an underwater robotics team in my garage. We invited friends from school and the math circle we ran. Some members had no experience with robotics and others had lots of experience, so I taught them by helping everyone build a land robot. In our second year, I reached out to more people in the community and grew our team from 10 to 22 members across 10 schools. We had seniors to middle schoolers on the team. I promoted returning members to lead the hardware, testing, and documentation teams. I led the software team where I taught Python, setting up Raspberry Pi computers, and streaming cameras. My mom knew someone whose nephew recently immigrated from Mexico and wanted to learn about robotics. I invited him to join the team, and I walked him through setting up the robot. Now he teaches others how to set it up. When I give individual attention, people develop useful skills and pass those skills on to others. On the competition day, we didn't tighten our electronics chamber and water shorted our entire electronic system, but we didn't mourn, we got straight to problem solving. The hardware leader unplugged and unscrewed the parts. I tested the computers and told members to grab working parts from last year's robots. My co-CEO calmed the team. In the middle of the repairs, we gave an award-winning 15-minute engineering presentation to judges. We miraculously got the robot working in time for our second pool run, and we placed third. I learned that to be an effective leader, I need to understand every team member's strengths and weaknesses. The hardware leader annoyed me because he started building without planning and made avoidable mistakes, but I appreciated his instant problem solving when we needed to rapidly rebuild our robot. Now that I know what he is good at, I can give him appropriate roles for his talents. I'm using what I've learned to lead our team effectively by giving everyone the chance to use their best skills. And this one ended up being about 340 words. Now, what a UC admissions officer would say about this one is, this one does add value, and it is what the UCs are looking for. It shows clear examples of leadership, many examples of leadership, exactly as the prompt was asking them to do. It also sounds like it's spoken or written in the student's genuine voice, like what they would say in an interview. The previous one was, my goodness, it was beautiful. There was so much vocabulary. It was hard for me to picture someone in an interview talking about austerity and metal and all these kind of really highfalutin words. If that's part of your regular vocabulary, that's fine. But this student, I would say their genuine voice came through. Everything was appropriate and everything was intelligent, but it didn't mean it had to be extra fancy or that the vocabulary had to be especially advanced. It also included descriptions of specific situations and actions. And so that was really good. Okay, so I want to kind of go on from the UCs and address other types of college application essays as well, because I know a lot of people might be applying out of state, or they might be applying to private universities, and more than 1,000 use what's called the Common App. And so if either Danny or Charmaine, if one of you could drop the Common App link in the chat so they can see that. I want to make sure they are familiar with that. So the first thing I just want to point out is that an academic essay that you do for school might be different from the PIQ in a couple of ways. The PIQ, you want to think of it almost like an interview, whereas your academic essay might be something like argumentative or expository. The PIQ can be a text block. It can have a conversational voice. You don't need an introduction and conclusion paragraph, whereas the academic essay definitely needs to have introduction and conclusion and clear bodies. A lot of times an academic essay will be research-based, whereas the PIQs are examples from your life. The academic essay might have to do things like cite sources or use quotes from experts or external data. You don't need to do any of that in the PIQs. You don't need external sources or links or quotes. It's really just you telling your story. As far as how is it the same and different from the Common application, we'll get into that. So commonapp.org is the website. It has hundreds of private universities, scholarship organizations, and sometimes out-of-state public universities as well. There is an essay portion on it. They give you 7 prompts, and the student chooses just one. And this time it is an essay, a proper essay that needs paragraphs and can be creative writing if you want it to. They are pretty lenient with the word count. It could be anywhere between 250 and 650 words. And the Common App automatically integrates with your Google Drive if you want to just upload your essay from Google Drive into Common App. They have a way to do that. So here are, for 2023, here are the 7 essay prompts. You'll see how some of them are very similar to the UC prompts and some of them are a little different. But I'm just going to go through and read them, and then we'll kind of talk about what they're looking for in the Common App, if that happens to be the application you're doing. Okay, number 1, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. Number 2, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? So that's kind of similar to the UC number 4 and 5 about a barrier or a challenge. Number 3, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea, what prompted your thinking and what was the outcome. That really is not similar to any of the UC ones. Number 4, reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? That's also not really similar to any of the UC prompts, although it could kind of touch on community service a little. Number 5, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. Number 6, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So this is kind of like the UC one on an academic subject, but this one is more general. It doesn't have to be an academic subject. It could be like a philosophical concept, a topic, an idea. All right, and number 7 is kind of like UC's number 8. Share an essay on any topic of your choice. It could be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. Okay, so what is the Common App essay like? What is the PIQ like? How are they similar and different? So the PIQ, again, 4 responses, 350 words each. The Common App, out of 7, you only choose 1, and it's a 650 word maximum essay. The PIQ is not scored on structure or style, whereas the Common App essay, one of the things they are looking at is the writing style, and they recommend a 5-paragraph structure. The PIQ's tone would be considered factual because you're telling facts about your life. The Common App would be considered more of a literary tone. It doesn't have to be creative writing, but it could be. So it could center on an anecdote that has a hook or dialogue or something to catch the reader at the beginning. Whereas a Common App might be supported by something like letters of recommendation, which are required on the Common App. The UCs don't, most campuses and most departments don't require or ask for letters of recommendation. So they're looking for examples, and they're looking for examples from your life over like storytelling. So you're telling details, but you're not trying to put them in the moment. The PIQs are about self-advocacy. And focusing on actions that you've taken and the impact they had, whereas the Common App focuses on personal values and growth experiences. They both are kind of asking like, who are you? But the PIQs, the UCs are specifically looking at what have you done with available opportunities, whereas the Common App can be a little bit more quirky, creative, philosophical, like who are you, how have you grown? The PIQs for the UCs, they really want to know also what you've done, not just who you are, but what you've done. Describe your leadership or your community service or your devotion to a subject or whatever it might be. All right. And I don't think I'm going to spend time on this because scholarships, that's a whole other thing. But sometimes scholarships do also ask for a short written prompt or thing like that. Okay. So if you have future questions, and I will stay on after this so that Danny and Charmaine and I can answer other questions. But if you have something you want to email me, again, my email is kkwhitaker@ucsd.edu. And the recording of this webinar and the slide deck will be posted tomorrow at calsoapsandiego.org on the blog section. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will see if there's anything in the Q&A. Now is a good time to ask. If anyone has more questions, please type them in the Q&A. And if one of you could read them out loud, and we'll do our best to answer if there's other questions.
Okay, we have a question. Are Cal State applications similar to UC applications? What
Great
are the
question.
differences, and
Okay.
are the expectations the same?
Okay, so they do have slightly different minimum standards. Like, for example, the bare minimum for CSU GPA-wise is a 2.5, whereas for the UCs, the minimum is a 3.0. The application is similar in that we'll ask for all your classes in high school, all the grades you've received. If you took any tests, like an AP test, it will ask for that. And it asks for some brief things. However, the big difference is that the CSU application does not have an essay. It does not have PIQs. You're not going to have to write anything like in terms of an essay or a piece of writing for the CSU application. You will for the UCs.
We have another question. It's, are there any other steps necessary for international students applying to the UCs? I'm applying with Mexican education.
Okay, so what I'm kind of addressing right now is just the personal insight questions only. And those are the same for international students as they are for domestic students. However, there are other parts of the application that might require something else from you. There's certain parts where they ask about your residency, your citizenship. They're trying to determine if you would qualify for in-state or out-of-state tuition. They might ask you about language, like for example, to make sure you might have to take a test like the TOEFL or something equivalent to prove your competence in English. So there are other parts of the application as an international student that might be a little different, but the PIQs themselves are exactly the same for domestic and international students.
Okay, we have another one. What's your take on the college advice FAD fad that says students should have a spike to be super competitive for admission?
They should have a spike.
Yes, it's in quotations.
Let me see. Honestly, I'm not familiar with that terminology. Unless you're talking about like that you should have kind of like a sudden improvement in grades or something like that. But I'm honestly, I don't want to answer that until I'm sure. And you could email me this question, but I'm not familiar with that terminology. So I'm gonna table that answer and you can email me and I'll do research on that because I'm not sure if I'm thinking of the same thing. Sorry.
Okay, there's a few more. I'll do another one for you. What would happen if you don't get in?
Okay, so if you don't get into your first choice of campus, like say you apply to two UCs, you don't get into either one, what I usually recommend to people is you have to apply widely. I tell people maybe consider applying for a reach or a dream school, like maybe it's hard to get into, maybe you don't know what your chances are, but you're really interested. Then also apply for some fit schools that are probably a good fit for your GPA and so forth. And then always have a backup plan, either a university that you know that you'll get into or a community college that doesn't have a competitive admissions policy. It's at the community colleges, it's not competitive. It is first come, first served, and making sure you fill out your application. So I tell everybody always have like maybe a dream school, definitely some fit schools, but don't forget about a safety school or having a plan for a community college application as well. Because you can also, if you get into a community college and start out there, you could go there for 2 years and possibly transfer. And your chances of getting in as a transfer student, just percentage wise, it's likelier, or they admit a higher percentage of transfer applicants than freshman applicants.
They have another one, which is, are IB test scores valid for college credits?
Yes, the UCs specifically, and also many other colleges, will give you college credit for like a 3-4-5 on the AP exam, or there's an equivalent. I know it's a different scale for IB exams, but yes, IB exams, if you get a certain score, just like on the AP exams, yes, you can get college credit. So usually one test would be the equivalent of like a 3 or 4 unit class, depending on if you're applying to a college with a quarter or semester system. But yes, you report those scores. And once if you're accepted and you matriculate into that college, that actually goes on your transcript as like college credit. So it's like a class you maybe don't have to take in college. So yes, IB scores can count.
Okay, there's another one. If my writing style is more like the first sample essay, should I change it to be more conversational?
For the UCP IQs, I would say, yes, you should change it to answer the prompt and to try to mirror what you would say if you were actually in an interview with an admissions officer. That doesn't mean that you have to forego your own personal style or tone of writing. It's just that if it tends to be that way, think of it like, okay, this is not a piece of writing. Think of it as like, this is what I would say in a conversation. And that's what I would do for the UCs. However, if that was your writing style for a Common App, that might be brilliant. That might be perfect for a Common App essay. So keep that in mind if you're not just applying to UCs, if you're maybe applying to some privates, keep that style because the Common App loves that style.
So the Spike student said, by spike, I mean something that a student is super good at / experience in to the point where it's their theme. Like they have a focus in their application theme, like leadership or an extracurricular achievement that is national, state, etc. level.
Okay, I see. This is a little bit difficult to answer, but what I'm going to say is, at a lot of times at public institutions, like the UCs or the CSUs, they don't tend to change that much in their policies or their trends from year to year. It remains rather consistent. So I would say at the UCs, they're probably not going to be as interested in or excited about that spike that you're referring to. However, at smaller colleges, private colleges, liberal arts colleges, things like that, there is a lot more change and movement in year to year in like what's the admissions trend this year. And so you might find that that might work better for some kind of niche school or some kind of smaller or private campus. I don't necessarily think it would be a particular benefit at a UC. That's just my personal opinion. All right, we've actually reached 7 o'clock, so I'm not able to answer. I want to go ahead and end the webinar. But again, if you have questions, I put my email address in the chat. It's kkwhitaker@ucsd.edu. Feel free to contact me and ask me your questions. And I want to just give a thank you so much to Danny and Charmaine, who helped with the Q&A. You were great. You were awesome. And thank you to everybody for spending your time here. And feel free to reach out and contact me if you have any questions. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.